Welcome to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety, where we talk about the real issues out on the road, focus on safe driving, and learn industry best practices from your hosts Kenny Ray, Mike Bohan, Jim Seibert, and Barry Harrison, and the hopes that by driving the line, we get more drivers home safe and sound. This podcast is made possible by Marsh McLennan Agency.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Driving the Line, the podcast that's always in the pursuit of safety. I'm Jim Seibert, and I am joined with my friends and co-hosts, Barry Harrison, Mike Bohan, and Mr. Kenny Ray again. You got all four of us, and we're all happy to be here. Today, we're going to talk through episode 51. We're going to talk about some things that, if you've ever experienced it, or been around or been near an event as this, it can really shatter your way of thinking. It can strike some fear into you. It can bring things that have always seemed far away so close to home and make you feel unsafe. It's a difficult thing to manage. It's a difficult thing to wrap your head around, and it's something that employers and employees should all be aware of and plan for. And Mr. Kenny Ray is going to lead us in a discussion today over workplace violence. Mr. Kenny, thanks for taking this topic. What's some things that we should know about, we should share with our listeners?
Well, Jim, I'm going to dive off into that, both with some statistical information that I know you'll probably end up either adding to or supporting. You tend to be the research guy on our team. But before I do that, with the permission of my three colleagues and three podcast co-hosts and the two ladies that run our show, I want to give a shout out, a real quick one, and I want to give a brief background. Y'all know we've got some really, really cool caps, driver caps, and baseball caps, if you will, for the podcast. And then our ladies came through and got us these awesome koozies that we've been handing out at driver meetings, safety meetings, various, all four of us speak and present at conferences. And anyway, we've been getting the word out about the podcast. And I want to tell y'all, there's a young man. In fact, he's still a student, what you would call a kid, that I go to church with his grandmother, and she let me know that he listens to our podcast. And so I got him one of our caps and one of our koozies, and he sent me the sweetest thank you note. How many kids today still write thank you notes? But he did, mailed it through the U.S. mail, and I want to read you. It's very brief, but it says, "Dear Mr. Kenny, thank you for the Driving the Line hat and koozie. I really appreciate you thinking of me and sending them my way. The hat looks great. I've already enjoyed wearing it and using the koozie on my Dr. Pepper." That's a Texas thing. I don't know if y'all drink Dr. Pepper or not. "It is especially cool since I am interested in trucking. I enjoy your podcast episodes and look forward to listening to more. Thank you." And his name's Levi. So I want to give a shout out to Levi and to his Mimi, his grandmother, and just tell Levi, thank you for listening to the podcast. And this is a young man that he told me he either wants, when he grows up, wants to be in law enforcement or wants to go into the trucking industry. And just a neat kid and a good kid. And anyway, I want to give Levi a shout out. And thank you for the sweet thank you note, Levi. All right, workplace violence. Y'all know we are, all four of us guys on here, safety guys, but we all come from different backgrounds. And my background's law enforcement. And unfortunately, I've worked some cases involving workplace violence. And this topic is near and dear to my heart, not because I'm affectionate about it, not because it's something I'm passionate about, but it's something that I'm absolutely doing everything I can to prevent workplace violence, because I've seen firsthand the consequences, the devastation, the aftermath that comes with it. And there's one part of it in particular, and I want to, Jim, with your permission, I want to speak in generalities for just a few minutes, and then I want to make specific applications I never lose sight of the fact we are a trucking podcast. And I want to talk about how this impacts our industry. And unfortunately, it does impact our industry. But 2022 is the last year that we have ironclad stats from the federal government through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they get a lot of their information from the FBI, but incidents of workplace violence. And sometimes when we throw big numbers around, they're so big, it's hard for us to even wrap our mind around. But in 2022, and I realize now we're in February of 2025, I get that, but it takes the federal government about 2 years to catch up on stats. So 2022 is the last year of solid data that we have, and there were 524 fatalities in the U.S. of workers directly attributed to workplace violence. Now let that sink in. That's more than one a day. Now, and this is not school shootings, church shootings. You know, those are the ones that tend to make the news. These are people that are being killed through some act of violence while they're at work as part of their job. More than one a day are dying in our country in workplace violence. And of that number, 435 of them were directly attributed to gunshots. So, I mean, we can just get real quick. The danger from workplace violence is somebody getting shot at work. That's just what the stats tell us. But an even bigger number, over 57,000 non-fatal injuries. I mean, do the math there. That's, you know, that's over 1,000 a day, almost 2,000 a day, or 200 a day. I mean, divide the number, 57,000. Barry, you or Mike one, crunch the numbers while I'm talking here. Divide 57,610 by 365 and tell us how many people a day are getting injured at work. Not, and Jim, you're our OSHA guy, not from OSHA stuff. We're not talking about getting their hand mashed, you know, in a press or having a piece of a grinder fly off and getting their eye out. We're talking about somebody being assaulted. We're talking about violence against another human being in the workplace. I mean, just let that sink in, the enormity of that situation. And guys, y'all know I'm in Texas, and I'm the oldest guy on the team. I'm old school, and I still live in the part of Texas that's kind of like the old South. But and we pride ourselves on being Southern gentlemen. And I'm gonna bring something up here that upsets me to no end. I'm gonna tell you, this is one of the factors that motivates me the most in this lifelong quest that I've had to deal with this workplace violence. And I know all three of you guys are gentlemen in your own rights. I fully understand that. And we tend to be very protective of females. But this workplace violence is not an equal opportunity phenomenon when it comes to gender. Over 72% of the victims of workplace violence are females. Guys, let that sink in. 3/4 of the victims of workplace violence are ladies who are getting hurt at work. Again, not through OSHA type stuff, not through what we normally think of as workplace injuries. These are women that are being killed or seriously injured, normally by a man. Oftentimes a spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse, a boyfriend, a spurned, you know, relationship, whatever. And the guy comes to work wherever she works and assaults her, and in many cases kills her. And that should make us as men furious. In fact, we should take a personal pledge. None of my female coworkers are ever going to get hurt while I'm there. I'm just not going to let it happen, you know. And what's really frightening, I want y'all to think about this. That is 3 times the rate of men getting assaulted or killed at work. And the number one cause of men dying in the workplace is still traffic accidents. I mean, the one thing that kills more males work-related in the U.S. are transportation-related incidents. And yet the greatest danger to women are workplace violence. I mean, let that sink in. If you've got a male and a female coming to the same workplace, the minute he drives through the gate and is in the parking lot, he just left the most dangerous part of his day, which was the commute to work. She just entered the most dangerous part of her day. Let that sink in. That ought to be completely unacceptable to every man on this planet, that we let women come to work and they just entered the most dangerous part of their day. That to me is just, it's simply unacceptable. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the transportation or trucking industry. The number one industry where people end up getting hurt or killed at work is what the Bureau of Labor Statistics call protective services. That's security guards, okay? Those folks get assaulted and killed more if you lump people into categories. But guess what number two is? Transportation workers, our industry. That should embarrass us, that workplace violence, we are up near the top. The only job that's above us in terms of the impact of workplace violence are people that wear a gun and a uniform to work. I mean, they're there knowing that they may be exposed to violence, whereas us in the trucking industry, you know, we think of our greatest danger being out there on the highway, and it is. I'm not minimizing that at all, but it should embarrass us and make us commit to changing the fact that our industry is so high in terms of the number of incidents.
Hold on a second there, Kenny. I want to go back real quick as I pick my jaw up off my desk here. Hey, Mike, Barry, which one of you guys ran those numbers that Kenny asked for?
It comes out to about 157 a day.
157 workplace violence incidents a day?
That's non-fatal. That's people not being killed, but being assaulted. And let this sink in. We cannot repeat this enough. We are not talking about what people traditionally think of as OSHA injuries. These are not people getting fingers smashed, getting eyes knocked out by some abrasive, you know. We are talking about somebody coming into somebody else's workplace with a gun, with a knife, with some instrument and intentionally assaulting that. Let that sink in. 150 a day. And Mike divided that by 365. So if you take just a work week, Monday through Friday, the number's even higher if you take the weekends out. So we're talking about almost 160 people every day get assaulted at work and survive. That's unacceptable, guys.
And yeah, and then take that number and figure out the 73% of it, and that's the females.
Yeah, exactly.
I would never have imagined, you know, in my focus area, it's predominantly the males. And I don't know, you can call us knuckle draggers, you can call us, you know, we're just we don't make the best decisions sometimes, but I would not have thought that it was the females being on the receiving end of the workplace violence. It's such a contrasting percentage versus males in the workplace. It blows my mind.
I'm actually thankful that you had that reaction. And let me tell you why. I teach a workplace violence course unique to the trucking industry, and I've taught it literally all over the country. And every time I bring that up, there is just dead silence in the room, dead silence. Two things. Number one, the females that are in the room acknowledge the fact that many times they feel scared at work, and the men are embarrassed. I always get 100% of the time, I get the same response, dead quiet in the room. And to me, that's a teachable moment that, again, for us as men, we should commit personally. I'm never, ever, ever going to let one of my female coworkers, one of my colleagues at work, be a victim. I will step in before I will let that happen. And let me tell you real quickly, because I've worked some of these cases. Let me tell you how they happen. What'll happen is there'll be an estranged relationship at home that has nothing to do with the job whatsoever. And she, the female, finally gets to the point she's tired of getting beat up. She's tired of being verbally abused. She finally reaches the point where she leaves. And what she'll normally do, it'll be a regular day. He'll leave and go to work, and she will have already arranged with a friend, a girlfriend somewhere, and she'll get her stuff and she'll leave. And he comes home, has no idea she's done it. And he can't find her. She doesn't answer the phone, doesn't take text. A lot of times there's alcohol or drugs involved. And over time, he just builds up a fury. And one day he decides, well, I don't have any idea where she's living, but I bet I know where he drives by her workplace, and sure enough, there's her car. And so he knows now, even though she's left, she's still going to work every day. So now he knows where she is, and he cooks this plan up in his mind, and that's what he does. He goes up there, alcohol, drug fueled, whatever you want to say. The cases I worked involved alcohol and drugs, so I'm telling you firsthand. And it had to do with the dissolution of a relationship that he was unwilling to let that be a civil act. And so the only place he could find her was at her workplace. So he brought problems from home into the workplace, but she ended up being the victim of it. And we see that happening over and over and over. That's why the numbers are so high for women. It's not that somebody comes into the workplace and just randomly says, well, I'm going to kill all the women here. It's normally a relationship that's gone bad, and it's an intentional act. It's a targeted act. He's looking for somebody specific. Now, a lot of times he'll harm other people that are there, and then normally will harm himself. The cases I worked at, 100% of them, he killed himself after he assaulted her. So it's a very real issue. And at some point I want us to talk about, what we can do to prevent it. And that's a good segue right there, is that there needs to be enough open communication at work that if a woman, a female employee, feels that she's in danger like that, she needs to let somebody know. So at least the company can be aware, if he shows up, that he shouldn't be there, and that sort of thing. But we could spend a lot of time talking about preventative measures, but that's one of the things. And I want to tell y'all, not to make light of this, because there is nothing light about this, but I want to tell y'all an odd story too. I mentioned that the largest percentage of these workplace violent cases involve gunshots. They involve somebody bringing a weapon, a gun, a pistol, a rifle, a shotgun to work and shooting somebody else. That the stats just tell us that is the greatest percentage. But there's other things that are used too. And I worked a weird case one time. And fortunately, it didn't come to fruition, but it was designed to come to fruition. There was a large warehouse. The employer will just remain unnamed. But one of the bosses came to work one day, and in the employee break room, there was a birthday present wrapped, sitting on the counter in the employee break room with his name on it, wrapped in birthday paper and everything. And several people were sitting in the break room drinking coffee and talking before their shift started. And the boss came in, the supervisor came in, and one of the employees said, "Hey, boss, there's a birthday present for you over there." And he said, "Well, how'd they know it's my birthday?" "Well, they post employee birthdays." So he walked over there and looked, and I talked to this man. He said, the second I walked over there, I felt something wasn't right. And anyway, it was a present wrapped in birthday paper and had his name on it and everything. And he picked it up, and he said it just felt weird. The package felt weird. And he put it back down, and he turned around to those employees and said, "Did any of y'all see who put this down?" And they said, "No." And he said, "Y'all all need to go out. Something's wrong here." And he called 911. And local law enforcement, local police department came out there, and a young officer came in. They were thinking a bomb. But this officer noticed an odd smell about this box, and got to looking, and there were some holes that had been poked in the side of it. And he took his flashlight and was looking at those holes. And he said, "I'm telling y'all, I think what I'm seeing," and I'll make this very quick. They ended up getting a trash can, a large plastic, kind almost big as a 55-gallon drum. They put that box down in that empty trash can now, and they used a stick basically to open it. Inside that box was a full live cottonmouth water moccasin snake, fully alive. And we have all kind of venomous snakes in Texas, but the cottonmouth water moccasin is the one that in my state gets most people's attention because it's a very aggressive snake. It'll chase you. It'll get after you. If it gets in your boat, it'll come after you. And somebody went to the trouble of catching a live venomous cottonmouth water moccasin snake, putting it in that box. I've yet still figured out how they let go of it at the end to get it in that, but it was in that box, fully stuffed. And this is a box about the size of a box like shoes would come in. Picture something about that size. And somebody wanted to have that supervisor get bit by a snake. And so I started doing interviews, and this is a huge warehouse. They have about 800 employees. And I just started interviewing people out there, and one name just kept coming up over and over and over. I would just randomly ask people, who do you think would do this? It rocketed around the warehouse what had happened. And so I would just ask people, and one name just kept coming up. And so finally they brought that guy in, and I sat down with him, and I said, I want to talk to you about the snake in the box. And he said, I don't have anything to say. He said, am I under arrest? And I said, no. And he said, okay. He got up and walked out, walked to the HR department and quit on the spot. And I know he's the guy, but we never could. We fingerprinted the box. We fingerprinted the paper. We did not fingerprint the snake. We took it to a local zoo. As far as I know, they still have it. But my point is, there's somebody, think about that. They wanted to have their supervisor get bit by a snake. That's the kind of thoughts that, and I use that just as an example of how people just sit and stew about things and then decide they're going to commit an act of violence at work. And unfortunately, we have it in the transportation industry as well. The two big things that happen in trucking, we've already talked about. It's female employees that a disgruntled husband, boyfriend, ex, whoever comes up there and attacks her. And the other one we've seen over and over and over. I had a case of it in Houston 2 years ago. A truck driver, felt like a dispatcher was cheating him on loads, that he wasn't giving him good loads. And a driver came in from a trip, had been thinking about it all day while he was driving, walked in the dispatch office and shot and killed a dispatcher. And because he felt like he was getting cheated on loads. So this is not a phenomenon that's foreign to us in the trucking industry. So Mike, Barry, y'all been around a long time. What are y'all's thoughts?
I kind of want to go back to this statistic with the females, the 72% kind of attributed to females being somehow subject to violence in the workplace. And I know when you go through those Department of Labor statistics, there's sexual assaults in there and things like that. So I think that increases that number quite a bit. But when you think about our industry, the trucking industry, there's more and more women entering this industry all the time as drivers. And there's a couple different places for us, if you're listening to us out there and you're sitting behind the desk as a safety director or an owner of a trucking company, you've got your facility there where workplace violence can happen, but you've got a whole bunch of employees that are out on the road, for weeks at a time. And workplace violence can happen out there on the road as well. That's your drivers, that's their workplace, their truck, truck stops, shippers, receivers, things like that. That violence can happen anywhere out there. And Kenny, as you're telling those stories, I had a few stories running through my head over the last couple of years of exactly the types of stories that you're talking about. But one, I know, it was actually before I came to Klein Wood. I was working with a company, and they had a driver that was, for all they can tell, involved in a road rage incident. Someone ended up getting this truck pulled over, and from what they could tell, this other individual got into a fight with the driver, punched this driver, hit him in a way in the neck where it crushed his windpipe, and the driver ended up dying as a result of this on the side of the road. And they never did find the individual that caused this, but that's a type of violence out there that your employees are seeing every day. So when we're talking about this workplace violence in the trucking industry, and Kenny, you kind of alluded to this just a little bit ago, is how do we guard against this? What are you doing at your workplace that's protecting your employees? What kind of processes, procedures, things like that you've got in place that you're doing to protect your drivers out on the road? I think that's something that we kind of need to work towards when we're thinking about this stuff, because as I said, Kenny, as you were going through kind of talking about some of the things that you've seen in the past, it was just bringing to mind some things I'd seen. It's like, well, how do you guard against it? And one of the areas that I'd thought of is I was at a state association. It was a truck driving championships. It was a state association truck driving championship, and it was exactly what you described. There was a husband that was coming because he was upset with his soon-to-be ex-wife. And the reason I even bring that up is because as soon as we found out about that, there was a plan in place. And the facility we were at had a plan in place. And we contacted law enforcement. There was a plan in place. And that's one of the things that I would recommend is don't just let this, as you listen to this topic, oh, those are stories that happen out there in the world. No, they can happen anywhere. So it's important to have the discussions and start getting a plan in place to know what to do if you feel like there's going to be a problem. I mean, you guys know we all go into locations where you could walk in the front door and walk right into the office and you've got full access to everything there just as a member of the public. Well, some of my companies are like that. Some of them aren't, but these are things you need to think about when you're protecting your folks. And it's too important of a topic to just say, well, it's, a lot of rural areas out there. It will happen to us. It truly could happen anywhere. That 157 per day of non-fatal workplace violence acts, that's a lot of folks that are getting physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, harassed, whatever the case may be. That 157 per day, not counting the folks that are losing their lives. It's a serious thing, and it can happen anywhere.
I was just going to say, Mike, you bring up something there that I've been wondering, and that's the demographics. I would like to see across the United States a pattern of where it is, and I'm sure that it's a population driven thing, but the density of where some of these events are happening. And I think that I would be surprised again that it's not just big cities. It's going to be spread out. This is a situation that is everywhere.
Well, I'm just thinking, and let's start making some applications now unique to our industry, because Mike brought something up about many trucking companies. You can just pull up. They don't even have a fence. They don't have a gate. So you have immediate access to the grounds. You park right in front of the building. You get out, you walk up and open the door, and you step in to the workplace. And normally there's an administrative assistant. Some people still call them secretary. There'll be a young lady there answering the phone, greeting people, and she don't know you from Adam. And within 5 seconds, you are in her workspace. So imagine if you had nefarious thoughts, how quickly that person could become a victim. I know we are in February of 2025, but Jim, you and Barry and I had an opportunity at the tail end of last year. We went to one of our really good clients, and all three of us did a safety program for them, and they had controlled access at their door. You had to be buzzed in. I mean, we pull up in their parking lot, but you walk up to their door and you can yank on it all day long, and it ain't gonna open until they let you in there. And so there's some simple things, all the way from a fence and a lock gate to controlled access doors. There's ways we can physically harden our facilities. So the owners of trucking companies, safety directors that are listening to us, think about your local yard, your local terminal. What could you do to make that facility safe in and of itself? And then how do we keep our people safe? And there's two main ways. Number one is policies, where you have a zero tolerance for any kind of workplace violence. So you don't put up with bullying. You don't put up with harassment. You just don't tolerate that stuff. You have policies in place. And then you do training with employees. And we always give Jim credit as being our OSHA guru. But, we've talked at length before about how trucking companies are under OSHA regs, particularly when it comes to emergency action plans. And we always think about fire and weather, but our emergency action plans ought to also include workplace violence. How do we keep it from happening? Do we train our employees? Do they know what to do if they hear gunfire? That's something that we need to be proactive about. And one reason I bring this up, and I'm going to stop and let the three of you guys talk because I've talked way too much, but I want to leave, particularly the owners of trucking companies that may be listening to us, I want to let you know from a monetary standpoint how devastating one of these acts can be to your business. Not so much, I'm not going to give you any stats on dollar losses, but I want to tell you, many business they plan for business continuity, meaning if the current owners decide to leave, retire, sell the business, die, whatever, how does the business itself keep going on? And they think about that more from a long-term standpoint in terms of years. How do we continue the legacy of the business? But I want you to think about business continuity on an hourly or daily basis, because I've investigated workplace violence situations that have occurred at a business. And what will happen is the second it occurs, everything there stops in terms of normal business operations. And the second law enforcement shows up, the owners of the business just physically lost control of the business. Because what's going to happen, law enforcement is going to go through the business. They're going to get everybody that's not related to it out. They're going to try to arrest or take care of the bad guy if he's still there. And then people are going to show up to help the victims, whether that's EMS or if there's a fatality, a coroner's office or whatever. But at some point, investigators, detectives are going to show up. They're going to get a search warrant, and they're going to physically take custody of your business until they're through with that investigation. And I've literally been at some where we maintained on-site presence for 72 hours. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, and all three of you guys on the podcast, y'all are smart men. Imagine any business you know of, if every employee had to get up without any notice whatsoever, walk away from their desk. You can't log out of your computer. You don't even have time to grab your purse or your cell phone. You simply run out of the building, and for 3 days, you cannot get access to your cell phone, the business itself, the building. You can't get access to the computer systems. And so I ponder when owners of businesses think, well, that may not happen to me, but if it does, what would I do? Can you run your business for 3 days if all of a sudden you're denied total access to every IT system, every file, every item you have inside your building? Could you still run that business? And what makes it more complex for a trucking company, imagine you got 100 drivers and the incident takes place at the terminal or the office, and those 100 drivers are out on the road and they're trying to call dispatch and nobody's answering the phone. So my point is, Mike brought up planning. I want to propose to you, if for no other reason you do planning, it's to maintain business continuity. If you're wanting to do it purely from a pragmatic standpoint of keeping your business running, you better have a plan in place if something like this happens of how are you going to maintain operations. And I've seen businesses that couldn't, and I know some businesses, and Barry, you've been in the trucking business a long time. There's some businesses that they run 3 days without revenue, they're out of business. So guys, we could probably talk about this topic all week long and get down at all the different granular levels. But I just wanted to talk about enough things to get people interested. If nothing else, they'll reach out to their safety professional, to one of us, and say, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee or a glass of tea and talk about this. What should I be doing in terms of planning for workplace violence?
Yeah, Kenny, you mentioned I'd been in the industry for a long time, and I wanted to just share with our listeners and remind you guys that I'm a graduate of Oklahoma State and studied psychology. And, when we talk about, I'll start off by when we talk about this training aspect, one thing I wanted to bring up is, on the training side, one thing that I'm a real believer in, that you need to involve your local law enforcement. So if something like this would happen, I encourage everyone to have that local law enforcement come in when you're conducting training and do some type of assessment, because not only are they assessing your facilities, but they're also familiarizing themselves with what they could be coming into if an incident would occur. If we do have an active shooter, it is very invaluable for that law enforcement agency to know exactly what they're walking into. The other thing I wanted to share is a free government sponsored program. And I wanted to ask the three of my co-hosts, when you guys hear the phone number 988, what do you guys think of? It's nationally known as the Suicide Prevention Hotline, but what it's actually been kind of evolved into is a crisis prevention helpline as well. So I want to encourage all of our listeners, if you have time, go to the website www.usa.gov, and one of the keys here is this 988 crisis prevention lifeline. It's been traditionally known as the suicide prevention hotline, but they've got some really good resources on there to how to find a mental health facility, warning signs for loved ones and family members, tips for talking about mental health, and what recovery can look like. So when we think about these things, we talked a little bit earlier about prevention, and guys, this resource is invaluable. If you know the signs, if someone's looking a little withdrawn from work, they're not acting like themselves. I talk about it a lot, and I'm a real big believer. Be your brother's sister's keeper. Reach out, see what's going on. Sometimes it's as simple as asking a few questions, and you can get tips on how to bring up any kind of mental health talk. It's one of the biggest crises in our country right now. Mental health, we saw through the pandemic, especially coming out of it, people struggled with it very, very hard, and I think we're still seeing some of the effects of that. So again, if you or one of your loved ones are having a hard time with it, this is a good starting point to get some good tips and just learn how to talk about it. Having a conversation is invaluable for someone who may be struggling with mental health.
Yeah, and Barry, the fact you bring that up, I don't know of a single incident of an active shooter situation that after the fact, when people were interviewed, they mentioned that they had been seeing signs, on behalf of the shooter. So you're exactly right. If those signs were there, we need to be picking up on them sooner. Jim, I want to leave you with two things, and I'll be done, and you can close us, or Mike can close us. But if nothing else this conversation has done, I hope the owners of trucking companies and safety directors will reach out to somebody that has some expertise in this area, whether it's your local law enforcement, a safety or security professional, and at least have a conversation about this topic. That's the main thing we wanted to do, was just openly discuss things so that trucking companies could say, hey, what would I do if that happened? So we want to generate that conversation. The other thing is this. I told y'all I teach a course on this all over the country. One thing I do, I show a little video called Run, Hide, Fight. And it's not the only method, but it is one method of showing your employees what to do. And of all things, this video called Run, Hide, Fight was developed by the city of Houston, Texas. The city government took a Homeland Security grant. They hired professional actors and a professional production company, and they spent a lot of money. It's very high quality. It's well done. And then they put it in the public domain. They just let anybody who wants to use it. There's no cost. There's no nothing. You don't have to get a copyright permission or anything. And I just encourage employers, if you do nothing else, bring your employees in and let them watch that video, Run, Hide, Fight. And I use it every single time I teach workplace violence prevention, and it is a very, very good tool. And I'm going to ask our two ladies, our brain trust, if whenever y'all advertise this episode, if y'all would put the link to Run, Hide, Fight. Again, it's in the public domain. The city of Houston has given it to the world. And we certainly would want our listeners to utilize that resource as well. So, Jim, Mike, Barry, thank you all for letting me share I'm very passionate about this topic. It means a lot to me because I've seen firsthand the devastation it can cause. And I'm committed to doing everything I can to keep it from happening again to people I know and love. So I'll stop and let you three guys close. And again, thank y'all for letting me share my passion about this topic.
Let me, if y'all will, let me be the nerd of the group, which I am, the outcast OSHA guy of the group. There's been a few comments that I'd like to expand on, and I would like to leave our owners, our safety directors, with some requirements that we have, and then I'll close this out here. We've talked about it without calling it what it is: rings of security. And Kenny, you talked about those business interrupters. When we think of rings of security, too often we are thinking of our cybersecurity and we're thinking of our financial security. Rings of security is the example you shared with controlling the door, controlling of who enters and gets on our property. And I'm going to provide you some resources to go to expand your business acumen about rings of security, and that'll be linked with the podcast here. Barry, you made an excellent point. In your emergency action planning, having those first responders present, familiar with your location, with your operation, with the type of business that you run, it's invaluable. It cannot be replaced. So let me leave you listeners with this. There is currently no specific OSHA standard for workplace violence. So if you want to type into your Google or search engine, hey, what's OSHA's regulatory requirements for this? There isn't one. However, but the general duty clause. The general duty clause, which OSHA created, the OSHA Act of 1970, employers are required to provide a work environment free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. Workplace violence is a recognized hazard within the trucking industry. It is a recognized hazard. Therefore, you must train and you must have a program that discusses workplace violence. And there's also going to be a link. Even though OSHA doesn't have a regulation, they have a workplace violence page. That link is going to be in there. It provides risk factors, prevention programs, training, and other resources. And you take this program that you train on annually, and upon onboarding of those new employees, you take this training and these pieces and you plug it directly into your required emergency action plan.
Jim, just the time we've been recording this podcast, 7 people were assaulted at work.
That's not a scheduled pause, folks. That's reality setting in for us sitting here looking at each other across the computer screen. Unfortunately, we all have to feel that right now. So think about this. Use the resources that we're plugging in. And this is too broad of a topic. It could branch and rabbit hole and finger off and branch off into many different avenues and discussion points. And this is something that obviously we care a lot about. And it's obviously something that we put enough importance on that we put it into our podcast schedule. There's so much. Please, please, please contact us. We are not hard to reach. If you've got additional questions, reach out to us. We always encourage you to go listen or go reach out to your trusted consultation service or consult provider. Reach out to them And I've got a feeling that there's going to be a part 2 to this at some point. And maybe it's not part 2. Maybe we're just expanding more in a future episode and maybe getting into some the weeds of what would a good workplace violence prevention program, what would it look like? And we get specific talking about, a trucking company. To our listeners, thank you for bearing with us through this pretty difficult topic. And gentlemen, Mike, Barry, Kenny, thanks for being a valuable part of the team and always contributing so much. Ladies, Aaron, Amanda, thanks for bearing with us and doing all the hard work. We will catch you guys next time on episode 52, where we discuss ATRI findings. Take care.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and thank you for listening. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or any other app you're using. You can also follow Marsh McLennan Agency on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Until the next time, thanks again for listening. Drive safely, everyone.